I did do the 12 steps. I'm not in a 12-step program anymore. It didn't ultimately end up being the right recovery modality for me, but it certainly helped me and laid a foundation at the time. It's just not what I ultimately needed.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you, I want to know what
Mm-hmm.
did work for you.
Mm-hmm.
But that foundation, like you said, was
Mm-hmm.
really helpful for me to simply, own my actions. What's my part in this, and
Mm-hmm.
try to keep, open dialogue and communication.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm a human. I don't want that responsibility of any kind of
Right.
perfection in any way. So yeah, it's a real challenge. But I've kind of been exploring things outside of just the 12 step rooms.
Mm-hmm.
What was it then for you after maybe doing some exploration in the 12 steps that you did find sobriety or
It
solidity?
was really mental health support. And for me, I think so much of my addiction was based in trauma. And it was for me, using drugs was a maladaptive coping skill, right? I say in the book, and I've said all over the place, that heroin saved my life until it didn't. I was extremely suicidal when I first started using, and it was like the thing that was like, okay, this is going to help me get through this so I don't jump out the window. I'm
Right.
not suggesting that's a good coping skill for anyone, but it was what I found, right? That's how we all sort of lean on those maladaptive coping strategies, is because we don't have healthy ones. And the trauma, and then the trauma caused by that maladaptive coping mechanism, alters the neural pathways in our brain, right? So that, it's like a trigger response thing, which is why, the neural pathway in our brain, the second that we are in discomfort, pain, any sort of suffering, we want to go to that coping mechanism. What helped me immensely wasn't just talk therapy, but was implementing different forms of cognitive behavioral therapy
Mm.
in my life, so that I learned things to um to try to practice, so that my first impulse when I was in pain was not to go back to a drug, right? Because
Right.
I mean, the last few years, as you'll see as you get towards the end of the book, I mean, the end of my using, I was not even getting what I needed. I wasn't getting the release anymore at all. With every relapse, it wasn't even that, the last couple of relapses weren't even that dramatic. It was just that it just wasn't working.
Mm.
And uh, over time, I learned how to use those new coping skills to stay in my body, to be in discomfort, whether that's emotional, mental, or physical. I don't mean pain, because if I have surgery, I take pain medication.
Right.
But it really, really was life altering, and it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And, I was fortunate enough that I had access to medical care. I had access to, see a psychiatrist, get on medication that I had resisted for so long, because when I was trying to stay sober, some people were like, oh, if you take, for me, it was Wellbutrin. They're like, oh, that you're not really sober. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Right.
And I just think, my thinking on that is completely different now. But I had so many conflicted feelings about psychiatric medication. I had so much fear of way more fear around being called crazy than being called a junkie.
This is the Knockin' Doorz Down podcast, featuring celebrities, experts, and everyday people who have overcome adversities, including addiction, mental health, and trauma, to live purposeful lives. And that's what Knockin' Doorz Down is all about.